Moneyball, one of my favorite movies. It tells the story of the 2002 Oakland A's phenomenally. It romanticizes the hell out of baseball and really brought the concept of analytics in baseball to the greater population. But one thing always bothered me about Moneyball. Where the heck are Hudson, Mulder, and Zito? Zito won the Cy Young that season and couldn't even get a mention. Buckle up, baseball fans. It's time to look back at that A's team. But we're not talking about Moneyball. No. We are talking about what Moneyball decided to leave out. How that 2002 season was actually just a part of a historic 3-year run from 2001 to 2003, where the Oakland A's Big Three combined for the best 3 years of pitching we'd seen since the late 90s Braves? Welcome to Good Vibes Baseball. Please consider subscribing if you haven't. I do appreciate you either way. Now let's get into some good vibes, shall we? But before we can jump into the trio and how they stack up historically, let's just call it like it is. The Oakland A's are a certified dumpster fire these days. Fans, they're organizing reverse boycotts as the team sets its sights on Las Vegas. Shitty. But things were not always like this in Oakland. Sure, the Coliseum has been dog shit for a very long time. The movie Moneyball even makes sure to really highlight how cheap the then owners of the A's were even back then, because it fit their narrative. Well, we're not in search of just a good narrative. We want to keep the good vibes going. And if you want to talk about good baseball vibes in the early 2000s, no better place to look than the Oakland Coliseum and all of its charm. Because, well, you know what? There was a trio of pitchers who were not only carving up hitters, but carving out their place in baseball history, even if Moneyball didn't want to mention it. One thing Moneyball did absolutely nail, though, the A's, well, they are a small market team. They have depended on scouting, drafting, and developing in order to win. Take it all the way back to the Philadelphia A's, and you see this history of developing players just to sell them off when they are at their most valuable. So the common denominator between the big three of Hudson, Zito, and Mulder, you guessed it, drafted and developed by the A's. Tim Hudson, drafted in the 6th round? With what he ended up doing? Is this a typo? No? Good for him. But Zito and Mulder, each high first rounders. But back to Tim Hudson. Those who remember him at his best remember a dominant sinker baller with a nasty split who always felt in control of the game, but also looked ready to kick someone's ass at a moment's notice. But his diminutive stature and the fact that he was just the Sunday starter at Auburn led to his fall in the draft. The A's did what they did best though, and found a gem. Fun fact, Pedro Martinez's success is what actually led the A's scouts to see past Hudson's size. Good call! Hudson ended up posting way better numbers than his draft position would lead you to think. He posted a combined record of 27-13, an ERA of 3.29, and a WHIP of 1.293 over the course of 3 seasons across 4 different levels in the minors. And this is without the use of his best pitch. That's right, folks. Billy Beane actually forbid Hudson from using his split in the minors. He was worried he was going to strike everyone out and wouldn't learn anything. Another great call, it turns out. Hudson carried his success over to the majors, too. His rookie season in 1999, he finished 5th in Rookie of the Year voting with an 11-2 record. And honestly, his sophomore season in 2000 is arguably his best season. He won a ridiculous 20 games that year while finishing 2nd in the AL Cy Young race and 15th in MVP voting. But this isn't just about one pitcher having a good couple of seasons. This is about much, much more. It's now 2001, and this is where the pitching greatness really starts to happen at the same time. The Oakland A's are coming off of a first-place finish in their division. They have reached a peak where their cheap talent has developed, and they have legit stars on this team. With Hudson's previous success, he is at the forefront of this. In 235 innings that season, Hudson posted a record of 18-9 with an ERA of 3.37, almost a full run lower than his career year of 2000. He also posted a better ERA+, FIP, and WHIP that season. He was an absolute beast who finished 6th in the Cy Young race. You know, just normal things former 6th round picks do. 2001 was just the beginning though. Hudson carried this consistency over to the 2002 season. Thanks to Moneyball, we all are very familiar with what happened this season. The A's had to pivot after losing Jason Giambi and Johnny Damon. We know. The movie made it look like they pieced together that team with a ragtag group of players. Well, this ragtag group included a now perennial Cy Young candidate, along with 2 other All-Stars leading that rotation. But we'll get to them. Hudson did not disappoint though in 2002. He posted a very solid record of 15-9 with an ERA of 2.98, his career best to that point. He also had an identical FIP as the season before at 3.60. Without Hudson, there is no Moneyball. In 2003, Hudson entered his age 27 season in arguably his prime. He was coming off of 2 straight seasons of setting career highs in innings pitched, and his ERA was continuing to trend downward. The A's were not going to take anyone by surprise, and Hudson would have had every excuse to not perform at that same level. But instead, he was even better. His 2003 season was phenomenal. Maybe not from an awards perspective, but simply from a numbers perspective, it might be his best year. He posted a pitching line of 16-7 over 34 starts with an ERA of 2.70, a new career best. His WHIP was also a new career low at 1.075. Dude finished the season 4th in Cy Young voting that year. 2003 Tim Hudson might be an all-time great A's pitcher. But again, this isn't just about one pitcher having a few good seasons. It's about 3 pitchers doing this together at the same time and for the same team. And how Moneyball decided this wasn't interesting enough to talk about. Speaking of interesting though, that takes us to the next member of this trio with maybe the best curveball that I've ever seen. Barry Zito. Looking back at Barry Zito's career, it's quite the anomaly. He was a beast, but he actually lost a lot of games. And for some reason, people gave him a hard time for liking things other than baseball. How dare he? But you know what? I loved him. And I don't know if we are ever going to see a pitcher succeed doing it the way he did ever again. His fastball lived in the low 90s at best. His control was solid, but I always found myself just a little frustrated with Zito. Like he made it just a little harder than it needed to be. But my God, you want to talk about what a curveball should be? Look no further than Barry Zito. What's funny is he actually credits his changeup as the pitch that really allowed him to succeed. Either way, he just knew how to pitch and also took the time to study his opposition. He knew his stuff wasn't going to overpower anyone. Picked 9th overall by the A's in the 1999 MLB draft, the USC alum was a reach, according to experts at the time. And you know what? The A's knew it. But according to then scouting director Grady Fusen, no one else had dominated one game the way he'd seen Zito dominate 5 that year. They then used the money they saved signing Zito under slot value to sign Gerald Laird, who actually ended up being a part of the deal that brought Carlos Pena to Oakland. So Moneyball can thank Zito for the Pena trade drama, eh? Zito didn't spend as much time marinating in the minors as Hudson though. As a high first-round pick, the A's were going to let him progress as quickly as his numbers dictated. He shot through the minors in 1999, pitching 68 1/3 innings starting in high A and ending in triple A. His combined line of 6-1 with a 3.16 ERA, 97 strikeouts, and a WHIP of 1.215 was fantastic for anyone, let alone a kid who was drafted just earlier that summer. The following season, Zito started the year at AAA again and after 101 2/3 innings pitched, it was time. Zito made his big league debut for the A's that 2000 season, and he did not disappoint. He finished the year 6th in Rookie of the Year voting after posting a 7-4 record with a 2.72 ERA, a 173 ERA plus, and a career best 6.2 hits per 9. All this while Hudson was winning 20 games that year. But 2001 is where our story really starts, right? And Zito, he definitely played his part. As with Hudson, the 2001 season for Zito was full of high expectations, not just for himself, but for that team. And you know what? Zito did not disappoint one bit. He started a career-high 35 games that season on his way to a 17-8 record. His ERA was actually almost a full run higher compared to the previous season, but at 3.49, he was still a stud. He even earned an MVP vote for his efforts that year, finishing 21st in voting. But 2001, well, that was just a tease at what could be. 2002, now that was Zito's masterpiece. The Oakland A's shocked the world in 2002. They had lost a couple of really good players and didn't have the money to sign suitable replacements. We know the story. They won 20 straight games and almost made it to the World Series. So how do you tell that entire story and not mention the best pitcher in the American League that year? That's right, folks. Barry Zito was not only the best pitcher on the A's that season, he was arguably the best pitcher in baseball. He won the AL Cy Young that year, beating out Boston's Pedro Martinez and Derek Lau. His numbers that year? Fucking phenomenal. He posted a ridiculous stat line of 23-5 with a 2.75 ERA, an ERA plus of 158, and his second best strikeout to walk ratio of 2.33 across 229 1/3 innings pitched. As the case with Tim Hudson, there is no Moneyball without Barry Zito. And just like Hudson, Zito's success, it didn't stop after the 2002 season. No, he kept it going into 2003. Coming off of the Moneyball season, the secret was out. The A's were not going to surprise teams with the Scott Hattebergs of the world anymore. They needed their stars to perform if they were going to win. And Zito, he did his part. In fairness though, this season is statistically his worst and the worst out of any of these three pitchers from the 2001 to 2003 window. But even then, pitchers would love to have these numbers for a season. Zito posted an underwhelming record of 14-12 in 2003. But dang, if that ERA didn't hold strong. Over the course of a new career-high 231 2/3 innings pitched, Zito posted an ERA of 3.30 and a WHIP of 1.183. Very solid numbers. Now, unfortunately for the A's and Barry Zito, he was never able to fully capture that same magic from his Cy Young campaign. But from 2001 to 2003, Zito was just like Hudson, dominant. And speaking of dominance, what about the third member of this infamous Big Three? Coming out of college, Mark Mulder was almost the exact opposite of Tim Hudson. A tall, dominant lefty with pinpoint control. Mulder even had such success at Michigan State in 1997 that Billy Beane, he's quoted as saying he didn't even think the A's would have a chance to even draft Mulder, and they were picking number 2 overall in 1998. But you know what? The Phillies took Pat Burrell first overall instead, and the A's, they got their man. In a move that many are hoping the Pirates would have done with Paul Skeens this year, the A's, they actually challenged Mulder right away by having him start his professional career in AAA? Seriously? Damn. Good for the A's. Yeah, Mulder started his journey in pro ball at AAA, just one stop below the majors. And you know what? It didn't go as well as they'd hoped. Unlike Zito and Hudson, Mulder did not find initial success in the minors and majors. Instead, he struggled quite a bit. His 1999 season, statistically, was nothing to write home about. with a 4.06 ERA and a winning percentage sub 500. And his first year in the majors? Well, that was a bit of a stinker, with that 5.44 ERA in 2000. But Mulder credits finding a routine as the reason he started to succeed. And boy, whatever he did, it worked. And luckily for us history fans, he found it right as the other members of the Big Three also found it. 2001 was Mulder's breakout season, and honestly, might be his best season. For someone drafted number 2 overall, Mulder's career ended up being plagued by injuries, so little did anyone know at the time, but 2001 was peak Mark Mulder. But guess what? Peak Mark Mulder was a frickin' stud. In 2001, he posted a career-high 21 wins while only losing 8 games over the course of 34 games started. He threw 6 complete games, with 4 of those being shutouts. My arm just fell off reading that. His ERA of 3.45 would end up being his second lowest mark of his career. He also finished second in the AL Cy Young race that year and 13th in MVP voting. 2001 was the year of the Mulder. 2002 was almost the exact same story. Mulder posted a record of 19-7 with an ERA of 3.47 across 207 1/3 innings pitched. His WHIP and ERA plus were virtually identical, and his FIP was just a tiny bit higher in 2002. Mulder had found his groove and was an instrumental piece of this Moneyball team. And as was the case with Hudson and then Zito, without Mulder, there is no Moneyball. But again, this isn't about 2002. This is about so much more. How'd Mulder fare in 2003? Well, baseball is hard when you are healthy, let alone if you get hurt. And the 2003 season was the first time injuries had really impacted Mulder's professional career. But luckily for us, Mulder was able to still start in 26 games in 2003. He was forced to shut his season down at the end of August due to a hip fracture, but his numbers, they were still very strong. He posted a 15-9 record with career bests in ERA and strikeouts per walk at 3.13 and 3.20 respectively. He also threw a remarkable 9 complete games in 2003. And this is from your third best pitcher. Sure, 2003 may have been the beginning of the end in some ways, but you know what? Nothing lasts forever. In fact, no 3 pitchers had pitched this well at the exact same time for the exact same team since the 90s Braves. And even then, I can argue that the trio of Maddux, Glavine, and Smoltz never had a 3-year stretch where all 3 of them were this dominant at the same exact time. Seriously, you'd think that is as elite as a trio as that is, and for as long as they were that dominant, that finding a 3-year stretch where all 3 of them performed at an elite level, it'd be easy. Well, not so fast, my friends. Now, let's establish something right off the bat. The trio of Maddux, Glavine, and Smoltz is on an entirely different level. We're talking hallowed ground stuff. Even from the A's Big Three, and I 1000% acknowledge that. But as great as those 3 were for that Braves team, and they were fucking amazing, I still can't help but see some similarities between them and the A's Big Three. Greg Maddux, for example. Let's be real. He is one of the greatest pitchers of all time. He won 4 straight Cy Youngs from 1992 to 1995 and even finished top 3 in MVP voting in 95. Picking a 3-year stretch where he was great? Well, give me any 3-year stretch from 1988 to 2002. Seriously. Look it up. He was so good. But when I look at the A's Big Three, I do see a right-handed sinker baller whose career numbers were also very consistent. Hudson may have had a more fiery demeanor, but Maddux was known as one of the fiercest competitors out there. Don't let the glasses fool you. No, Hudson isn't Maddux. Just like Barry Zito is not John Smoltz. Smoltz is a Hall of Famer who was a starter, then he was a closer, then he was a starter again, and was dominant each step of the way. But if you look at Smoltz's career, of the Braves trio, he is the only one with a career winning percentage under 600, just like Zito in the A's trio. And Tom Glavine, looking at Glavine's career stats, we see that it took him some time to put it all together. But when he did, ooh-wee, did he ever figure it out. Starting in 1991, he only had one season where his ERA was higher than 3.20, and that was the strike-shortened season of 1994. Sounds like a certain Mark Mulder if injuries hadn't gotten in the way. So which 3-year period were the Braves trio all three excellent? Well, I'm going with 1996 through 1998, purely from a statistical standpoint. And even then, John Smoltz, you made it a little tough with that 12-loss season in 1997. From 1996 to 1998, the Braves trio of Maddux, Glavine, and Smoltz averaged 17 wins to just 8 losses. They posted an insane average ERA of 2.72. That would be excellent for a single pitcher for a single season. And the Braves trio, well, they posted that as a 3-year average. Did I mention that Greg Maddux was really good? But it just wasn't the low ERA. They also posted up each time their names were called. They averaged 33 starts and 235 innings pitched over that 3-year span and posted a ridiculous ERA plus of 158 to go along with a 3-year average whip of 1.10. Huh. The A's Big Three just got a lesson, it appears. Well, again, not so fast, my friends. Looking at the A's Big Three from the 2001 to 2003 seasons, we actually see that they compare quite nicely. Hudson, Zito, and Mulder actually averaged one more win over their 3-year span with 18. Their average losses? Right in line with the Braves trio at just 8. And those whips? Also very comparable at 1.175 for the A's Big Three. Yes, the ERA plus number is 19 runs higher, and they did average a handful more innings. But we are talking about 3 bona fide Hall of Famers here. The fact that the A's Big Three can even stand up in this conversation is the impressive part. And you know what? Moneyball didn't want to bring any of it up. So what's the verdict? Did the A's Big Three put up the best 3-year pitching performance by a trio from the same team since the late 90s Braves? Let me know down in the comments. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please consider subscribing if you haven't. I appreciate you all. Until next time, baseball fans, cheers!